I love it when a game is simple, but still unique, and this game is definitely that. 3 Chapters is a card game for 2 to 6 players, and the goal of the game is to have the most points at the end of 3 chapters. Setup is quite simple. You just shuffle the deck and then deal out 8 cards to each player. And gameplay is quite interesting because the game will take place over 3 chapters and each chapter plays completely different than the previous one. Chapter 1 is essentially a card drafting game, and if you're new to the modern board game space, let me explain. A card drafting game, players will receive a hand of cards, in this case 8 cards, and they will choose a card and then pass the rest of the cards to the left or right. In this game, they pass to the left. And then you will receive the cards from the player to your right that they didn't choose. So then you will take those cards, and from those cards, you will select 1 card and add it to your hand, and then pass those cards to the player to your left. So you'll continually do this until you have drafted 7 cards. And the last card that no one picked just gets discarded and gets placed back in the box, or off to the side, or just under the table, whatever. It doesn't get used. Card drafting is pretty cool because it kind of helps mitigate the luck in a card game. Because you're not just receiving a hand of cards and now that's what you have to deal with, you actually have some say in what you get. And then you can kind of prioritize what card you want or what strategy you're going to take. But you do probably have to be kind of fluid, and because you're not always going to get all the cards that you want, but it is definitely one of my favorite mechanisms in a board game. But let's move on to Chapter 2. So in Chapter 2, you will have drafted 7 cards. Now Chapter 2 is what they call a trick-taking game. So one player will start each hand or trick, and they will place a card face up into the center of the table. Now going around the table clockwise, each other player will place exactly 1 card. Now the player who played the highest strength card will win 1 star. And stars are worth 2 points at the end of the game, and that's the whole goal, is to get the most points. So that's pretty good. But unlike most trick-taking games, the winner of that trick doesn't collect all the cards. Each player takes back the card that they played and puts it in front of themselves face up, because you will score those cards again in Chapter 3. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Prior to taking your cards back, after the player with the strongest card receives their star, players will then look and resolve the special abilities, if they have one. I think they all have one. They will look and resolve any of the abilities printed on the bottom of the card. For instance, this Captain Hook card. If another player had played the Peter Pan card, the player who played this Captain Hook would have gotten 2 gems. And gems are good too because they're essentially a half point at the end of the game. Or for instance, if a player had played this Snow White, the player who played Snow White would have received 1 heart, which is a point for each pickaxe that was played. So I guess this would be a good time to go over the anatomy of a card. In the top center is the card's name. To the left of that is the card's strength, and underneath that are the card's character types, and these character types are kind of like suits, if you will, and there's 8 different ones. And at the very bottom are abilities. So sometimes it's a good strategy for cards like Snow White to hold on to them and wait and see if players are going to play their dwarves, or maybe even multiple dwarves get played. But remember, in Chapter 1, when we're drafting these cards, you kind of have an idea of what cards are going to be played in Chapter 2. Yes, you don't know exactly when or how they're going to be played, but you can kind of use that to your knowledge and hopefully make the best out of the situation. But once players have played all 7 of their cards and they have their 7 cards face up in front of themselves, here comes the 3rd and final chapter. I would like to pause for just a moment and mention that this is a review copy that was provided by the publisher. However, all the thoughts and opinions of this game are my own. And if you find any value or entertainment in my content, please consider clicking that subscribe button, and Harley Dog here gets a pepperoni for every new subscriber. Players will then, in the order of their choosing, activate the abilities on the bottom of their cards. So for instance, back to Snow White, if I had any of the pickaxe characters in front of myself, I would get hearts for each one of them. So this is kind of another thing that you need to think about when drafting the cards. Yes, your cards are going to interact with other players' cards, but you still need to make sure that you have some synergy for Chapter 3, so that way your cards can kind of vibe together and get yourself a bunch of points. Yes, it's great to get the stars for having the highest number of cards when taking tricks, but that isn't always enough to get you a victory at the end of Chapter 3. But once players have activated all the abilities on their cards, the player that has collected the most gems will receive 4 bonus gems at the end before tallying up final scores. And tallying up final scores is quite simple. The stars are worth 2 points, hearts are worth 1 point, gems are worth half a point. And there's actually a nice little player aid here on the back of the rulebook. And the player with the most points is the victor. So that is 3 chapters in a nutshell. This game is quite unique. It does an interesting blend of taking common mechanisms found in modern card games and kind of blending them in a bizarre way. The game is easy to teach, the rulebook is nice and clear. I will say though, that even though it is an easy teach, myself and most people that I teach it to are kind of overwhelmed at first when you see all these cards, because all the cards are different. Like there's not 2 of the same card in there. So you do have to like take a look and read what all these cards do, which it's cool though, because some of the cards have pretty unique abilities on them. Yes, there's the ones that like Tweedledee, it's like worth points if he's with Tweedledum, and Tweedledum's is like he's worth points if he's with Tweedledee. But then there are some cards that have more interesting abilities, such as rewarding the players for intentionally losing all the tricks. Or some of the cards will only activate in Chapter 3, and they will greatly help you out with in-game scoring. Or there's a card that says something to the effect of, if you have exactly 2 hearts at the end of the game, then you will get 4 additional hearts, which is interesting too, because at first it kind of seems like stars are the best. You always want stars because stars are worth 2 points. And then you want to try to, if you can't get stars, then you want to try to get hearts because hearts are worth 1 point. But that's not necessarily the case though when specific cards are wanting you to try to get certain resources or points or whatever you want to call them. But the box says the game is a half hour long, and I would say that's probably accurate for your first game, including the teach. I would say games after that can easily be played in 20 minutes. So after your first game and you get rocked by someone who's played before, definitely play it again. And your second, third, fourth, however many games you play after that will be much more enjoyable because you'll be a little more familiar with the cards and the synergy between the cards, and then you'll kind of realize maybe different strategies to take, because having those high value cards are good because you'll win the trick, thus getting essentially 2 points for gaining a star. But if you win all 7 tricks, that's 14 points. Actually, that probably would win you the game, because I would say winning score in this game is somewhere between 12 to 16-ish. In that range is where you'll probably get a victory. But with the drafting phase though, I highly doubt that you're going to be able to get all those high value cards. The theme is super cool in this game, and the art, I love the art. Each card is different, and each card has these kind of comical twist on classic story characters, and they're largely quite cute and funny. I did prefer this game best with 4 to 6 players. With that being said, the 2-player kind of has like a variant. It was still enjoyable. The only reason I think I prefer the 4 and 6 player counts better is because you get to see more of the cards. So if you have Captain Hook, there's a greater likelihood that someone does get Peter Pan, or that Peter Pan is included in this game. Now in a 3-player game, you only see about half the cards, so you get your Goldilocks, but you quickly find out that the bears aren't even in play this entire game. The cards are a nice quality, have a nice linen finish, they shuffle well, the tokens that you use for the points are nice and chunky. The box is a nice size, everything fits back into the box well, and it's not overly big. Definitely recommend this one. It is a unique, fast-playing game. When you get it to the table, you're gonna get several plays out of it back to back because it is quite fun. This one's gonna rank pretty high. I think I'm gonna give this one a 4 out of 5. Definitely added it to my collection, and that is 3 chapters. For some reason, I keep wanting to call it 13 chapters. I don't know. I'm kind of an idiot, but and the box looks like a book. Oh.